How's it, friends? I'm Nazarbro, and I was just thinking about capital cities and how they could all change soon in World of Warcraft. However, before I get into talking about the cities of the Alliance and the Horde, there is some big news. Literally a day after I posted my first news video on this channel, Blizz dropped a brand new trailer during the Xbox showcase revealing the release date of The War Within, August 26th, a whole lot sooner than I'm sure most people expected, assuming no delays happen. I'll talk more about the release date and the roadmap during my next news video at the end of this week. So for now, let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming and let's talk cities. The idea for this video sparked mostly from the dialogue from this Earthen character that has moved into Orgrimmar in the beta, but has also stemmed from semi-recent resettling of the Night Elves and the Worgen. At the same time, we've got the Blood Elves doubling down on rebuilding Silvermoon because they also watched the BlizzCon presentation and know that they'll be front and center in the Midnight expansion. While their Burning Crusade counterparts, the Draenei, are also drafting plans for a brand new temple city as seen in their Heritage questline. Basically, it feels like Blizz is trying to shore up the home fronts for something, but beyond the obvious need for Silvermoon to be all fixed up and shiny for Midnight, what about the rest? Let's start with the easy ones to think about, Stormwind and Orgrimmar. Here's what the Earthen Modon has to say regarding Orgrimmar itself. We've been talking about Orgrimmar's scattered forges, and for a city as fortified as this, we're both a bit surprised at the lack of industrial forge grounds. It's just the thing a canyon city like this is missing, wouldn't you agree? Seaside coolant systems, cliff-carved quarries, a port for trade even. The opportunities to expand are endless. Now obviously this could point to literally absolutely nothing, just the musings of a new character lamenting the state of the city. But it does get the wheels turning, and I wanted to make a video about it, so let's operate under the assumption that it is something. If any cities were to be revamped, it would almost certainly be the two nerve centers of both factions, and Silvermoon because of Midnight. In my opinion, the two faction capitals getting a facelift is not an if, but a when. So I feel it's more fun to speculate on the changes specifically to Stormwind and Orgrimmar, instead of how or when. I think the main thing that would be fun to see is more of the other races that make up the factions have a bit more of an influence on the two capitals, but within reason, to still keep the identity of the city intact. A good example for Orgrimmar would be while most of it still looks like the classic orc architecture, perhaps there could be a district that reflects the friendship of the two Horde elven races. Imagine a small portion of the city which looks like a micro mashup of Suramar and Silvermoon. In my opinion, I think that would be pretty sweet, and yeah, I know there are some Horde purists out there who are not historically happy about the elves joining the Horde, and quote-unquote ruined the savage vibe, which I can sympathize with, to be honest. But they are here to stay, and I think having that reflected on a small, I said small, portion of the revamped Orgrimmar would be cool. There could be more Night Elf and Worgen druidic activity in the forested area near Stormwind Embassy, a sort of under-crypt area for the Forsaken, Kultiran Tide Sages and Shipwrights at the docks, some unified troll influence in Orgrimmar. The list goes on. And since the vast majority of players spend most of their downtime in the two capitals, when they're not in whatever the new main city of the current expansion is, it would really feel like an evolution of the factions as a whole. But outside the two big cities, what could be done about the other racial epicenters? First, let's give a quick recap. For the Horde, Undercity is doing alright, and the Darkspear trolls seem to be content just hanging out down the road from Orgrimmar. Thunder Bluff is practically unchanged and still going strong. The goblins are still shacked up in Bilgewater just up the road from Orgrimmar, and while goblins do seem to be getting some spotlight in the War Within, their city will probably stay unchanged for a bit. Silvermoon, like the Exodar, still lives in its weird Burning Crusade limbo, but we already know it's slated for some changes. Then of course the Broken Isles, which almost wholly belongs to the Horde at this point, with one of their largest, if not the largest, most powerful cities, Suramar, and the Torrent of High Mountain being in close proximity to each other. Not to mention the other notable powerhouse that is Zandalar. The Horde have it pretty good right now, to be honest. In contrast, the Alliance has gone through some big changes recently. At this point, the Night Elves finally have a new home in the form of Belemeth, after the conclusion of the Amirdrasil raid. Shortly afterwards, we did help the Gilneans take back their city in a rather underwhelming questline, although it did get the job done, I suppose. For the rest of the Alliance, Ironforge still exists and is pretty much unchanged, the Exodar is still a radioactive wreck, and Gnome are gone? Sorry, gnomes. Boralus also exists as probably the second most powerful city in the Alliance from a lore standpoint, with Mechagon not too far away geographically. So in the span of a few patches, the Alliance gained 2 more capital cities, even if they don't really do anything for you in terms of gameplay afterwards, unless you really just dig hanging out there. Now for our 2 airlocked Burning Crusade cities, things seem to be changing soon. The first of the 6 pre-expansion short stories to drop centered around Illyria Windrunner traveling to Silvermoon to see her son Eretor. She's kept under careful surveillance while there because, she almost blew up the Sunwell. But while taking a stroll around the city with her son, the story points out at every turn and every pause in dialogue that the city is being rebuilt. Such an emphasis on the reconstruction makes sense, since the Blood Elves and their very red and very gold holdings are going to play a key role in Midnight, so their entire airlock zone would need to be cleaned up and be more presentable for the modern sensibilities of players. This does beg the question though, what about the Draenei? The 2 races introduced way back in the Burning Crusade when I was like 10 years old have both been in their very strange containment cells locked away from the rest of the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor. With the Draenei Heritage questline, Velen reveals the plan to begin construction of a new temple city and finally move his people out of the probably radioactive wreckage of the Exodar. This could potentially tie in perfectly to Midnight. Back in BC, the Blood Elves and Draenei teamed up to form the Shattered Sun Offensive, to defend the former's most sacred place and combat the latter's millennia-old enemy. Both races held great significance in the climax of the Burning Crusade expansion. Some Horde players have lamented the idea of Silvermoon becoming, potentially, a neutral player hub in Midnight, but the Draenei city construction opens up a potential solution for that. Alliance players could shack up in the new Draenei city, while Horde used Silvermoon to stage the defense of the Sunwell. This means a revamped Quel'Danas could be the neutral point of contact, just like in the Burning Crusade. So Midnight's city problem is all figured out great, but now honestly it got me thinking, what purposes do the cities really serve these days? From a lore standpoint, they are obviously important. The fact that all the displaced Gilneans and Night Elves have a home again is fantastic, but revamping cities or constructing whole new ones is no small endeavor. And if you look at all the racial hometowns that aren't Stormwind or Orgrimmar, the one thing they all have in common, and have had in common for years now, is that they are very empty, devoid of players, and devoid of things to do. I'm not saying nobody hangs out in Ironforge or Thunderbluff, but compared to the 2 faction capitals, they are basically dead. I don't play in an RP server, though I wish I did. I bet the vibes are great. If they are more populated on an RP server, I wouldn't be surprised. Regardless though, with most cities being pretty much abandoned, is it in Blizzard's best interest to revamp the existing racial cities besides the 2 capitals? And at the very least Silvermoon? As things stand now, the answer is, unfortunately, probably not. But that doesn't mean we can't speculate on what Blizz could do to make racial city revamps more feasible, and more importantly, evergreen. To me, it all comes down to 2 things. The first being improving the new player experience. Jumping into WoW as a new player has always been messy since probably Cataclysm, as new players would always complete stories in the incorrect order or leave the vast majority unfinished. Even with the Chromie time system, you only get a snippet of an expansion, and you'll probably get to level 60 way before you ever get close to finishing the story of an expansion. With the introduction of Exile's Reach, Blizzard circumvented the need to ever create new starting zones or revamp the old ones, with a one-stop shop universal experience for everyone. While it does get the job done, you lose out on the fantasy of the race you choose, no running around under the tree canopies of Teldrassil, no learning about the vibe and the home of the orcs in Durotar. Getting a potential new player attached to their character is perhaps one of the most important things to achieve, and Exile's Reach, while quite good mechanically, doesn't go far enough. So how could things improve? Well, I would like to take a look at another MMO for some inspiration. Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 is such a fantastic MMO, held down by some other flaws that I won't get into, but for this specific topic, I will stick to how Guild Wars 2 handles the races. You can pick one of the 5 races: humans, bigger humans, plant elves, orcs but furry, and what would happen if you combine goblins and gnomes into one race. In character creation, you get several choices that define your early questing experience. I'm not saying this is something WoW should do, but I still want to go over it. I'll use the humans for the example, so spoilers for anybody who is considering playing through Guild Wars 2 at any point as a human. Your first choice is what level of society your human character is a part of, whether you're on the streets, a regular commoner, or a noble. Next, you choose a regret from your character's past, and the third choice is which of the 6 human gods your character is blessed by. The third choice is mostly a cosmetic choice, it just reflects what kind of priest appears in your home instance, but the first 2 choices determine what story quest you get at levels 10 and 20. While I'm not advocating for WoW to adopt a similar system, the thing these quests do well is establish your character in relation to their racial city. It gets them involved with what's going on. For WoW, if you opt not to play through Exile's Reach, you do get to play through some storylines that center around the racial cities and the surrounding areas, but they could be improved. With the new Renown system as it is in Dragonflight, I could see something like a self-contained mini-campaign set around the revamped cities, with Renown tracks that are evergreen and supply rewards related to the city. These Renown tracks won't finish when the mini-campaign ends, but rather can be progressed further with dailies, which allows players from other races to come and spend time in the other zones to earn the rewards. I think this would help keep every racial city alive with a feeling of activity that they just don't have now. For the second thing that could help the racial cities stay alive and be evergreen, I do have to whip out some buzzwords. Player housing. At this point, the player housing discussion is literally as old as the game itself, and I'm not sure what I could add that hasn't already been said. Like with Guild Wars 2 and its racial stories, other MMOs can be looked at for inspiration, and many other creators have already pointed out how games like Elder Scrolls Online and Star Wars The Old Republic already have the blueprints for a successful player housing system that could fit neatly into WoW, hopefully without each of the game's awful monetization. Imagine houses of a different quality and size in every racial city, with themed furniture to match, instanced once you enter to make it your own space to show off your achievements, collections, your sense of style. It's the ultimate gold sink. Of course, this is just some speculation followed by brainstorming that could be completely off the mark, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think there are some cool ideas, but they are my ideas obviously, so I'm inclined to like them. Basically, the race you play goes a long way to identify who you are in the world of Warcraft, and fostering that identity and improving the new player experience alongside it is something that I believe will help the game stay healthy and be more inviting to new players. I would love to hear your feedback and opinions on this and what ideas all of you might have for keeping the cities relevant without dating them too much, like how the current old world is dated to Cataclysm, even though it had been technically revamped at the time. Please consider hitting that like button if you enjoy how I do things here, and subscribing would mean the world to me. Until next time, stay safe, friends.